Mr. Balaji Krishnamurthy, welcome to the Rich Equation podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I am so glad we're doing this. Balaji and I met a few months ago at a Vistage meeting, and Balaji came in and did a talk or a speech or whatever you want to call it, a speaker series. And I think, Balaji, to be sincere to you, I think you must have been probably the top two, if not the top three speakers that I've ever had in my Vistage group. And I know that Bob would have agreed with me that you were the top three, but just such an engaging speaker and so much value in such a short amount of time. So I'm just honored that you're here today, and I'm going to try to squeeze as much content and questions and value out of this podcast as much as possible, but I'm just grateful that you squeeze us in. So thank you. You know, Balaji, you have had a really amazing career, and you think about things so differently. You've kind of come up through, different ranks of leadership, mostly for large companies, both domestic and multinational. And you bring this like whole nother perspective to leadership and culture. And again, I could ask you hundreds of questions. You've done such a great job of building content, both on YouTube, and you've written 2 books, which I'll let you speak about. But I thought that we could start at sort of a high level first, and then I have some situational questions that I thought were more relevant, and I think your insight would help not only myself, but the audience understand your framework of thinking. How does that sound? So let's kind of get into just leadership. Like, I'd love you for us to frame what is leadership to you in your experience.
Leaders influence others. Leaders influence others to think differently. Leaders influence others to act differently. Leaders influence others to behave differently. That's how they contribute. Leaders contribute by causing others around them to think, act, and behave differently than they might have had the leader not been present in the situation. And that by being present and causing others to think differently, the result of the situation is different. Even though they didn't actually contribute those results, they influenced those results to occur. So leadership can be measured, or the effectiveness of your leadership can be measured by asking, how many people do you influence, and how long does that influence last? So I call that equation leadership equals leverage plus legacy. Leverage is the number of people you influence, and therefore you have leverage. And legacy is the length of time over which that influence lasts. And so leadership equals leverage plus legacy. Think back to that day in Washington, in the hot summer day of August 1963, when 250,000 people assembled on the mall in Washington to hear one man speak. What leverage did Martin Luther King have on that one day? And what legacy did he leave behind? That is leadership. Leadership equals leverage plus legacy. How many people do you influence? How long does that influence last? And how did that influence cause different thought, actions, and behavior to occur?
Do you have to be thought-provoking to be a leader?
You don't have to be thought-provoking, but you do have to be thought-influencing. The word provoking has a notion of, I never thought of that, you caused me to think in ways that I never thought before. Influence says, I might have thought of it, but I never acted on it. It didn't come to the forefront of my mind.
So thought influencing means to incentivize more thoughtfulness or more action on that thinking, per se?
Yeah, to allow the thoughts to come to the forefront so that you can intentionally choose to act on it if you think it's appropriate. And as a result, your actions and behaviors have changed because that leader influenced your thought.
What do you believe about the state of leadership today in terms of let's keep it focused in terms of businesses and the leaders within companies today. What's the state of leadership today?
I don't know that I have lived long enough after 70 years of life to tell you how leadership has changed. You have to think about it in 500-year terms, and I'm not qualified to do that. You know, there's always great leaders in all times in history. Occasionally in your own life, you'll find there was a leader who really influenced you. Might not have influenced others, but influenced you. That's what that matters. Find leaders that influence you and ask yourself, for whom are you serving as a leader that's influencing them?
I love that. One of the things that I have pages of notes from our talks, and I purchased both of your books, and you have done a really great job of not only provoking thinking for me, but also influencing action. And one of the things that you talk a lot about when you're talking about building teams and building culture is you have and you're a great storyteller, which I was hoping I could get some good stories out of you today. But, you talk about like forced resignations as a strategy to build a culture where people are actually leaving, or you're almost forcing them to leave if they don't fit in. Can you talk a little bit about that in your perspective? For me, I always say that like within our company or within our businesses, we never fire anybody. They just get spit out. And that part, or that comment for me really resonated. So I'd love you to speak a little bit of that to the audience and tell us a story if there's one that connects to that.
Yeah, but before I actually dive into that or any other questions you might have of me, let me, for the benefit of the audience, let me put forth a leadership philosophy that I practice for my leadership. It doesn't make it right or wrong. It doesn't mean others should do that. That's how I lead. And that philosophy is question the obvious, rationalize the outrageous, and ponder the consequences. I question the most obvious things. Why should people get paid at work? You can go through and understand the reasoning, but it actually causes you to think differently as a result of that introspection. Question the obvious, rationalize the outrageous, and then ponder the consequences. So with respect to resignations, let me give you a thought experiment. Suppose everybody in the company was asked to go to a website where that you created, the employer, and the employee said, if you give me $5 million, I'm willing to leave. They put a number in. I think most people would say, I'll leave if you give me $5 million.
Sure.
Great. Of course, you're not going to do that. But they can change that number any day. And so they get disgruntled. They go, you know what? Gosh, nobody's going to take $1 million even. I'll take 100,000 and go. They bring it down to 100,000. Now you get to see these numbers. You, the employer, get to see these numbers. And you can, at any time, go to the person, give them the money that they have bid, and shake hands. Goodbye. This is the system.
Okay, so basically, you can change the number at any time, and the other say that again.
The employee can change that number at any time, and the employer can essentially invoke the action at any time.
Okay.
And the number says, for this much money, the employee is saying, for this much money from the employer, I will leave the company.
Okay.
And everybody's got a number.
Right.
It might be a ridiculous number like $5 million. It could be a pretty attractive number like $10,000.
Right.
Then you take the statistics of that data. If you have enough people, let's say you have 100 plus people in your company, look at the statistics of that data. What is the statistic going to tell you? If the numbers are going up, what does it mean? If the statistic, the mean is going down, what does that mean? If the standard deviation is very high, what does that mean? This is an interesting thought process. But what I'm trying to point out here is that every employee has a number at which they will take and leave.
Yes.
You want employees that want high numbers.
Yes.
Whatever high means. I don't know if 5 million is high or 50,000 is high, but high numbers.
I would say yes.
And you really don't want employees that have low numbers.
Yeah, that's probably true too.
So it behooves you to precipitate the resignations of those that have low numbers.
Low numbers.
That essentially say, for $10,000, I'll leave.
Yeah, go.
Costs you more than $10,000 for that person to be around your organization. And that's the whole idea of resignation exercise. There's a second thought process that occurs here. If you and your executives got together and listed all the 100 people in your company and asked, whose resignations would I accept if they tendered it?
Yeah, I love this exercise.
Simply a thought experiment. You imagine they tendered the resignation, they came into your office. You know how at 4:55 p.m., you're in the office and there's a knock, and if they come in and this person goes, Ashish, I need to have a quick chat with you today. And there are one of two things that happen in you. If this is a very valuable person, your heart sinks.
You either get scared or excited.
Or if this person is somebody you wanted to go, you go, oh yeah, tell me more. What do you need?
We all have that. We all have that list in our head. Maybe we don't write it down, but we all have that list, right, Balaji?
Talk about it. So get in a meeting and ask, would I accept this resignation or not? And you put a check mark on the people whose resignations you would accept. So now ask yourself, why is that? Is it because of them? Is it because of you? Is it because of the environment? Are they just not fit in this environment? Can we find a different solution that might benefit all of us? It forces that thought process. That's what the resignation exercise is about. Both of these two thought experiments, the resignation exercise, if they submitted a resignation, would I accept? And the cash exercise, how much money would they take to leave? Forces you to think through the people who are not really happy in the current situation and take action about it. There are three parties involved. It's not just them. It's not just the employee. It could be the employee, the manager as a representative of the company, and the environment the company has created. Mm-hmm. All three contribute to that state of affairs. You got to address one of those three and change it. Otherwise, you can't let it be as it is.
And you talk about this really well in the book about why it's so important to get rid of these underperforming employees. And you talk a lot about the contrast between performing employees versus engaged employees. And you use the analogy of a rowboat, basically, of people coming into the boat, and that three people who are really engaged are rowing, and maybe there's like two or three others that are keeping the rows in the water and kind of dragging, and there's five that are not rowing at all. And so the perspective that 30% of employees are really engaged and 70% are either mute or unengaged, and the cost and the consequences of that, that's really where this is coming from, right? And that you do not need employees, or you really want to try to force resignations for employees that are either dragging you and slowing you down and or not contributing anything to just get more leverage. And I really want to talk about change next, but speak to that, please.
Yeah, first of all, I prefer not to use the word get rid of employees. I prefer to use the word graduate them to their next opportunity.
Yes.
Because my experience shows, and I've heard this anecdotally from a lot of other people, that when you have somebody who is really not growing within your organization, whose contributions you're not appreciating in your organization, when that person moves to the next position, they, more often than not, if not almost all the time, they find themselves in a better situation.
I find that to be true also.
And so the word graduate seems to better capture the notion rather than get rid of. The former being moved to a higher plateau, the latter being moved to the trash can. So that said, the rowboat analogy, it is not only that there's 30% of the people who are rowing and 20% of the people who are kind of keeping along, but the other 50% is actually not just doing nothing. They're rowing the wrong way. They are actually detracting from the hard efforts of the other 50%.
Right.
Which is why one of the quotations I often use is, most companies can double their business with half their employees. The other half is keeping you from doing so. The second half of that statement is very important. The other half is keeping you from doing so. Now, this other half are not bad people. They are just not aligned people. They are not aligned to your purpose, your mission, your goals. It's just not what they want to do.
Right.
They happen to be there.
And that's not bad. They just need to graduate to something that, just makes space for someone who wants to align with that.
Right. In fact, I say they can graduate. You don't even have to backfill, because that they were bringing along. Half the employees can double your revenue. The other half is keeping you from doing so. And there are many examples. At Planar Systems, a company I ran, we went from 1,000 people to 437 and more than double the revenue. Whether you like Elon Musk or not, look at what he did at Twitter. A third of the employees are doing the business.
Right.
What were the other 2/3 doing? These examples abound. So it's important that you find people who are engaged. Here's another little comparison I'll give you.
Why is it, though, that he gets so much slack for that? I think any other entrepreneur in his position would have probably done the same thing. Why is it that we so quickly judge an entrepreneur for doing what he believes is necessary to keep a company alive?
Sometimes your personality is either what's the word? Engaging or offensive.
Okay.
People who do have offensive personalities need to have an adequate amount of charisma to have their fans ignore the offense.
To compensate for the offensiveness.
Right. And Steve Jobs is a good example.
How did you deal with that from going from 1,000 to 400 people?
By the way, and we brought in 300 from the outside of those 400.
So you graduated 900.
Right.
You graduated 900 of 1,000 team members, and you brought in 300 new ones.
Right. Actually, more than that, and some of them we graduated again. So the math is even more complicated.
How did you deal with that? How did you deal with that as a leader, and what was the perspective for you, and how graceful were you perceived during that period? Well,
you must, before you say, how did I deal with it? I didn't do it.
Right.
The team did it. Okay. Maybe of all of them, I brought in 8 people and graduated 15, whatever the number is, but it's only 20, 25 people that I work directly with. The rest of it all is various people in the company. So you've got to get the whole company to adopt that philosophy. You see, long tenure is historically considered a good thing. There are 2 kinds of employees that stay with you a long time.
Of course.
The first kind is those that you really, really want. And the second kind is those that nobody else really, really wants. Because the people that nobody else really wants, where are they going? They're staying with you.
Touche.
So is long tenure a good thing or a bad thing?
Yeah, you're right. So you're saying that a long-term employee, either we really, really want them or no one else really, really wants them. And so by definition, if an employee sticks around us for longer, then that means that no one really, really wants them. Can we take in?
Not necessarily. You might want them so badly. You're keeping them. So I'm not dissing all long-term employees. All I'm trying to point out is they fall in 2 classes.
Right.
So constantly ask yourself, which
do we still want this person?
Right. So imagine you said to yourself, and this is so true for small companies, by the way. This is not true for the Googles and the Microsofts and the General Electrics, which are large companies. But small companies do not have enough places for people to grow into.
Right.
They just don't. So another one of my quotations, small companies must graduate really good employees. Think about that.
To get better ones?
Because you are sucking their life out of them otherwise. If they're really good, you only have so many people you can keep. They don't have any more new opportunities in your company.
Oh, I see. So by letting them graduate, tell me how that helps. I mean, I understand how that helps them, but tell me how that helps you if they're really good.
The next person who's going to apply is going to realize that you really are about them. You're going to grow them, and then you're going to graduate them. In fact, this conversation should start at the point of interviewing, and then must occur at every month thereafter when you have the one-on-ones. And you talk to them and say, how long do you think you're good here? Most employees want to say, oh, till I retire. And the reality is, they shouldn't be with you till they retire, particularly if they came in very young. You don't have enough opportunity. For most people, you won't have enough opportunities for them. So you got to start a conversation with them as, there are only so many opportunities. So, think about what other opportunities in the company you might want to go after, or what other jobs outside the company you might want to go after. I will help you. I will mentor you to think through that. And that conversation slowly moves to, if I go outside, what kind of company would I go to? What kind of jobs would they have? And you help them think through that. You help them, research some companies. And then a job opens up in this other company, and they come to you and say, hey, Ashish, there's this job, and you help them through that. You prepare them for their interview for that job. You help them negotiate the salary that they're, and finally give them a party, go home. They stay with you. So my graduates of my companies are invited to our summer barbecue.
So most entrepreneurs who are listening to you are saying, Balaji, you're crazy. What are you talking about? Why would I do that?
Exactly. Because you would get so much better talent if that is the brand of your company.
That the input would be better than the potential loss of output. And the potential coming employees, great employees coming in versus the great employees leaving.
When you keep a great employee for a long time, they've given all they can. You see, everybody walks in with a bag of tricks. Things they know how to do.
Yeah, it's true.
And you know what? How long can you keep the magic show on? You've done all your tricks. You
don't think that's a little bit lopsided in terms of, I think there's, you learn a significant amount in the beginning of your career. Perhaps then you start to mature skill sets and your capacity, which I don't think this is necessarily true, but let's say that your capacity for learning starts to have diminishing returns. Is that a fair statement? I don't know. So
diminishing returns, but it plateaus in that job. Put them in a new job, they would grow again. But in that job, it will plateau. But at the same time, by the way, so at the same time, so you just drew a graph that over time measured the amount of skills this person have in serving that job. They come in with a certain amount of skills that you found adequate for the job and hired them, and they grow those skills in the job quite rapidly at first because they're learning a lot of new stuff. The growth goes up, so their skills go up, and then it starts to plateau. You drew that graph. I'll draw another graph on the same axis, the same time axis.
That's the opposite.
It's a liability graph. What the graph you drew is the asset graph. I'm going to draw a liability graph. The liability consists of all the mistakes this person has made, and the organization has pinned these mistakes on them. And they can't shed the baggage that's on their back. And every day on the job, this baggage grows. Very slowly, hopefully, but it grows. It never goes down. This baggage, they learn from the mistakes, makes the asset graph go up, but they also are pinned with this. They made a decision somewhere. They tried a $10,000 marketing campaign, didn't work. Well, nobody's forgotten. That's the $10,000 salary. the one that spent $10,000. We all knew that wasn't going to work. Nobody forgets it. Next time she wants to come up with a, $15,000 program, which is actually fantastic, nobody believes it. This baggage continues to grow. So you've got an asset graph that rises quickly and plateaus, a liability graph that slowly grows indefinitely. Now do the net graph, assets minus liabilities. Well, at some point, it starts going down, because when the asset graph is plateaued and the liability graph continues to grow, it's beginning to decline. Doesn't mean that they're not good. They're adding great value, but they would add even more value in a new place.
So so tell me about this perspective that employers have. And I think there are some roles, even for me, where I think that, in this role, we really need to hire for skills. And then in some roles, we don't really care about the skills. We're looking for aptitude, which perhaps mirrors more of what you're talking about in terms of we want somebody who can learn and grow quickly, but they may have a liability chart that constantly keeps going up because they're making mistakes that are costly to the company. How do you know? I mean, is there one versus is one better than the other?
I don't think it's ever one or aptitude. I think almost always it's a combination of both. Now, admittedly, if you've got a nuclear research program and you want a nuclear scientist, skills is a significant component to it.
Right.
Okay. But managing a shop floor, maybe, skills is less of an issue, aptitude is probably. So there's a combination of the two.
Sure.
So I say to people, bet on horses, not on races. Let me explain what I mean by that. The way we hire, most companies, the way we hire goes like this. There is somebody who's doing a great job. This person is doing a great job. She came in 5 years ago. She's wonderful. She's done this and she's done that. And then, you know what? She's so good. She finds that something needs done. So she adds that to her portfolio. She's a very, a conscientious employee. And then there's something else that somebody else is doing, but they don't do it very well. She's really good at that kind of thing. So she goes to them and says, hey, I'll take that on. And there's something else she doesn't like to do. She gives it to somebody else. So her whole portfolio moves and changes over the 5 years. 5 years later, she gets another job somewhere else. So she leaves. So you need to backfill. So you call HR, please get me a new candidate. So HR comes and interviews and finds what she used to do and makes a list of all the things, specific things she used to do. Notwithstanding that was just her plate of things she had on her plate. They make a list of all these things and they go and post a job description. I want somebody that does all these things. It's almost like they came and took an imprint of the seat this person sat in, made a mold of this seat and said, does anybody's butt fit this mold? And goes out and looks for somebody who fits this mold perfectly. The reality is nobody's butt fits that mold. That's how we hire. Before I explain what bet on horses means, let me give you another example. Suppose you had a position open and there were 3 candidates. I'm going to list the 3 candidates. Candidate A has done exactly what you want done. Has done that job before, but they're out of work now. That's candidate A. Candidate B is doing exactly the job you're looking for. Has experience, has done that. Has a job, but is disgruntled in their job. So A has done it, but out of work. B is doing it, disgruntled in their current job. C is somebody who has a job, hasn't done what you're looking for, is aspiring to be promoted to that position, and their manager, who loves them, keeps saying, yeah, eventually we're going to get that to you. You're going to get that. And, they're getting a little tired of this promise, no action. They want your job. Who would you rather have, A, B, or C? A, who's done it, doesn't have a job. B, who's done it, has a job, is disgruntled. C, who's not done it, is aspiring to do the job. Who do you want?
I would hire C.
You know what? Most people would tell you that. Let me tell you, HR gets those 3 candidates.
Oh, HR would hire.
They will bring to you A and B.
Yeah.
C doesn't even get a check. You don't even get to see C.
Right. Oh, I see what you're saying. Right.
C is not even brought to you because HR have screened them. Let me add it all up to bet on horses. So instead of hiring for a specific position, which I call betting on races, hire good people whenever they're available, wherever they're available. Go to people who have a job and say, hey, I got a much better job for you. Come to my place. And they say, what's my job? Anything you want. You are a free agent. Come, you are a stallion I want in my company. Roam the pastures of my company. Tell me anything you want to do. That's your job. You got 6 months to figure that out. Anybody, if somebody's already doing the job, that's okay. You can take their job. I'll find something else for them. And so they start roaming around. They start sniffing into different people's jobs. Guess what your existing employees are all doing now? They all know this. All of their game has gone up because every existing employee is going, wait a minute. You mean this person can come and tap on my shoulder and it's like a musical chair and I'm out and they're in?
Everybody gets sharper.
Everybody gets sharper. And now some people will get intimidated by it and they might graduate. Well, you already have somebody to fill the spot. Right.
You're just constantly bringing in new horses.
Bet on horses, not on races.
You know, I've been observing this contrast in different aspects of my life, both in and out of the business. And I love your perspective. You know, you say that all perspectives are true and partial. And as I was preparing for the podcast, that statement keeps resonating with me, especially when it comes to this thing that I'm really working on, is the dilemma of value assessment when it comes to a buyer and a seller. And I think I would like to frame it in terms of two things. Buyer and seller in terms of goods, let's say a product. Okay. So a buyer puts a certain assessment of value on something, a physical good, and a seller does as well. And in normal terms, a buyer thinks that they pay the price of whatever that is, but they determine that the value is too high, although they just pay the price because they have to in order to get it. And the seller takes the price, but isn't happy because he thinks that the price should be higher than it is. And so there's this natural dilemma, right? Both different perspectives. And then when it comes to the second situation I'm observing is when it comes to employees, right? Is as a boss or as an owner or as an employer, you're putting this value assessment on an employee, and the employer is accepting that price in terms of a salary, but often thinks that they are valued at a higher price or perhaps undercompensated in some way. And so there's this dilemma as well. And when I think about these things, I've been starting to think about it more philosophically of like, well, what is true? Who is right? What is the true value? And how do we assess real value, not necessarily materialistic value, I guess, which would be framed in the terms of price, right? But, you know, Balaji, your podcast is worth $100. Like, that may insult you. You may say, bullshit, it's worth way more than that. But I offer that to you, you accept it, therefore it's worth $100. Is that true? And so that's what I'd like to kind of unpack with you. It may get a little philosophical, which I think is okay. It's the intent of my question. So what do you think?
Well, economists would say that in an efficient market, the money you paid is equal to the value you received.
Sure.
It might not be for some short period of time, but in an efficient market, it will soon zero into that value.
Right.
But that's only in an efficient and liquid market. Efficient meaning all information are readily available and easily accessible by everybody. And liquid means there are options you have. Employment is not an efficient or liquid market.
Right.
Let me make an observation before I answer your question, or give an idea to answer your question. In any transaction of commerce, such as you go and buy a bottle of water at a convenience store. You go to the convenience store, the store owner priced the bottle of water at $1.95, and you paid $1.95. You wanted it. You might say that's too much, go to the next place or not have the water. Right. But if you want to buy it, it's $1.95. Who determined that price? The vendor did. And the customer, what option do they have? They have the option to buy or not buy.
Right.
That's how commerce works. Vendor chooses the price, customer chooses to buy. This is how all of commerce works. The roofing contractor comes, looks at your house and says, $15,000. You decide whether you are going to hire this guy or not. It's $15,000. Vendor chooses the price, customer chooses to buy. Now, how do you tell who is the vendor, who is the customer in a transaction? Well, vendor provides goods and services, customer provides money. Would you agree with that?
Sure.
Okay, in an employee-employer transaction, in that relationship, who is the vendor, who is the customer? Who's providing goods and services? The vendor. Who provides that? The employee.
Mm-hmm.
The employer provides the money, so they're the customer.
And
so we said the vendor should choose the price. So the employee should choose the price. And by the way, at that convenience store where you went to buy a bottle of water, next day, that price could become $2.15. The store owner could say, I'm increasing the price. He doesn't have to ask you for permission. Unilaterally, the store owner increases the price. The vendor can change the price unilaterally without consultation with the customer. And what can the customer do? Not buy. So imagine that's how we operated our employment. The vendor, i.e. the employee, chooses the price and can change it anytime. All they need to do is to send an email to payroll. From next month, my pay goes up to this much. And what can the customer, the employer, do? Choose not to buy anymore.
But is that realistic?
Why not? Imagine what would happen if you did that.
Okay, let's
think through it.
Let's think through it. So
remember my quotation, by the way: question the obvious, rationalize the outrageous, ponder the consequences.
Okay, so let's rationalize the outrageous here.
Yeah, we did. We said the other way now. Now let's ponder the consequences. What would happen if that was the system? By the way, you, the employer, is out of salary management. Completely out of that.
Right. It's all spot rate management.
So what kind of employees would dare ask for more?
Only the ones that are providing the most value.
And which ones will simply not ask?
The ones that are not.
What's your problem?
Touche.
So what will happen is that you have a higher standard deviation, higher disparity between what the people who are contributing a lot get paid and what the people who are not contributing will get paid over years, because they would be asking. Now, there are problems with this. There is definitely individual personalities that come into play.
Well, employees would test. I like this philosophy because you're right in some sense. I think employees would try to take advantage of this dynamic until they hit the highest market price they possibly could, where the employer would say no. I think employers would hate this because it would, well, not hate it completely, but would probably fear that they were being exploited and or overcompensating the top employees. But in contrast, you would have employees that were high performing that you paid at market price, and then the rest of them that wouldn't ask. So it is quite interesting.
Is not performing and you were too timid or not able to graduate, will get less and less and less comparatively.
Why would it get less?
Because if they asked, you would say, no, thank you. And they would have to leave. So they won't ask. So after 3 years of not asking, they're getting less than the people who have been asking 2 times a year.
So, right. So they're just going to graduate themselves.
Well, or they can't, if they can't find a job anywhere else, they're going to stay with you. You know what? Most managers would tell you this. Most managers would agree. If they have 10 people, there are some people who should be getting 30% less than they're getting, and some people who should be getting 30% more than they're getting.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
This will force that to happen.
Right.
But it has adverse consequences as well. There is definitely personalities of employees that are really good and contributing that just will never ask. That's just their personality. One might even argue that there might be gender bias in this. That maybe, one could make an argument, right or wrong, that women might not be as forthcoming to ask as men would be. Although I wonder if that is because they won't go to the other person and face them, but when it's simply sending an email to payroll, they might do that. I don't know whether this will help or hurt women. I'm not suggesting you go and implement it tomorrow, but it is in the way I think. Question the obvious, rationalize the outrageous, ponder the consequences. Ask yourself, what can I do short of what this crazy guy is telling me to do that kind of gets to the point that he's getting to?
Well, you definitely like to ruffle feathers in the thinking that you provide, the thought-provoking ideas that you have. You had a really interesting, I don't know what to quite call it, but you were trying to get to how do all the employees assess value to each other? And you provided a framework, and you can talk about it if you want in terms of details, but you provided a framework where you basically gave, let's say, $100 and a little piece of paper where somebody had to assess that $100 to somebody else within the company. They couldn't assign it to somebody that they reported to. And I don't know if they had to give it all to one person or they had to divide it. And you just put it into an envelope and you passed it back to HR, and HR accumulated all the money from every employee. So let's say you had 100 employees, you gave $100 to each employee, and they all distributed to each other. So what that did was actually create a distribution of value based on the employees' assessments of each other. And many people got a lot of money and many people got nothing. And it was clear to everybody who got something and who got nothing. So I thought that was so profound, so interesting. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but these kinds of ideas are really disruptive, incredibly disruptive. They really think shift, right? They shift your thinking in a lot of ways in terms of how to work through some of these really archaic structural issues that we deal with as employees, even as governments, that help us ruffle feathers, perhaps even be disruptive in, I think, in clear, innocent ways in some ways.
Yeah, that system, by the way, has multiple outcomes. One you pointed out, if 100 people hand out each $100, so to keep it simple, they have to give it to just one person, and they have to write a paragraph on why they gave it to that person. How many people will get if 100 give? Well, it turns out only about 30 or 40 people would actually get all of the 100 giving. So each person is going to get 2, 3, 400, and 60 people aren't going to get anything. Then you do this every quarter, say. What is the overlap between the 30 or 40 that got this quarter and the 30 or 40 that got the next quarter? Well, it turns out about half of them will be an overlap. So every quarter, some 15, 20 people will be getting a few $100s every quarter. But so that's the first part of the outcome, which is purely rewards, financial, small amounts of money, but rewards outcome. There is a second outcome that is, I think, even more valuable and is absolutely worth the investment by the company. And that is, management has got 100 paragraphs written by employees praising their peers.
So powerful.
That has great value.
Right.
So if you implement this, do not omit the paragraph requirement. Also, the requirement of the paragraph keeps the following from happening. There won't be collusion. You give me one and I give you one. So it keeps collusion it minimizes collusion if it occurs. Yeah. Second, there won't be favoritism or pity. So you stayed up front. Your reasoning should not be for personal need. So a single mother, that's not a good reason. I mean, single mother needs it, but this is not the vehicle for taking care of that issue. This is a vehicle for company performance. And so it takes away some of those things.
You have such great frameworks to think about these kinds of issues in business and leadership and culture building. Let's take it to government. I would love your perspective on government. We are sitting at a place where we have more debt than we've ever had. Our bureaucracy is fatter than it's ever been. It's bigger than it's ever been. It doesn't matter whether you're Democratic or Republican. What are the things you're thinking about right now, and how would you deal with this? I guess in terms really of even just looking at effectiveness of government, perhaps balancing cost to budget. What is going on? What are you noodling on into when you look at the government and how we behave as a political system right now?
This is a dangerous quicksand to walk into.
Yeah, there you go. I'm putting you in it.
but I'll share with you 4 philosophies. I'll just stay at the philosophical level. 4 philosophies that I believe in. The first philosophy is, I don't know of a better system than a capitalistic system that is efficient and good for the society. Is it perfect? It is not. Is it without problems? No, it has its own problems. Do I know a better system? I don't. So the idea of capitalism, where allow people to do what is in the best interest of themselves to create wealth, and the society will prosper. That's the first philosophy. Capitalistic system is the best system I know. Second philosophy, governments are inherently inefficient. They do not know how to execute very well. So they should limit their activities to legislating and enforcing. So the legislative, judiciary / military, enforcement, that should be the job. Execution should not be their job. They should really minimize the amount of execution. They should get private enterprises to execute what they have legislated to occur. So that's the second philosophy. Third philosophy, nobody attained their heights without standing on the shoulders of others around them.
I love that.
I did very well running a company called Planar Systems. I did well, both, I think, results and financially, personally, very well. But did I deserve all of what I got? Not really. Lots of people helped me. And the way the system works is if you succeed, you get an inordinate amount of reward. And if you fail, you really lose, but probably not as much. So this amount of reward you can get in the capitalist system, it's very large. Do I have a better system? I don't. Am I going to give back anything that I got? No. But should I give it back? I have some obligation to all the people around me whose shoulders I stood on. I think people have to remember that. The idea, I made this money, this is my doing. No, it wasn't just your doing. You did it with the help of a lot of people. They get rewarded too, but you got rewarded far more than they did. And there's some obligation you have, and you decide how to fulfill that obligation. That's the third philosophy. Nobody attained their heights without standing on the shoulders of others around them. The fourth philosophy is actually a song by Phil Oakes. And it goes like this: there but for fortune may go you and I. And the song is about how, you see a prisoner, was he in the prison because he did something wrong? Probably did. But there but for fortune may go you and I. Don't forget that our circumstances and situations don't deplore the people that are down on their luck or down on whatever in life as totally their fault. There but for fortune may go you and I. So those are the four philosophies that drive. So collectively, I look at government as saying capitalism is the best way to go. Government shouldn't be actually executing. They should be legislating and enforcing. Entrepreneurs should understand when they succeed, yeah, they did good. They worked hard, but they've got some responsibility to give back to people on whose shoulders they stood, or some proxies of those people. And fourth, when you find people or individuals or groups of people that are down on their luck, there but for fortune may go you and I. Don't, have compassion.
What else have you been noodling recently? What are some of the issues or topics that you are bouncing around in your head about life or business?
I'm at that stage in my life where I've had a good career, but this is what I do. I don't have any hobbies. I don't do anything around my house. I have somebody mowing the lawn, take care of the yard. I don't even change light bulbs. I got a guy who comes and changes light bulbs. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, it's pretty close to that. So I don't do anything else. This is what I do. And I love business. I just love business. So I like to talk to business people and understand how they do business and ask questions and learn from it. And so I have built a retirement career where people think, why are you still working? I'm going, I'm not. I'm playing. This is fun. That has caused me to ask, when do you start thinking about that? Now, it isn't pertinent to me because I'm 70 and I'm thinking about it. Should I have been thinking about it at 30?
You mean thinking about turning work or business into play? Is that what you mean?
No. Thinking about what would retirement look like.
I see.
Not everybody has to do what I chose to do.
Right.
But they shouldn't fall into it at the age of 70. What point should you be thinking about? So I'm trying to figure out a model for what conditions should occur in your life where that becomes a thought process and if that thought process begins, or you became going to be disgruntled with what you're doing, that you haven't reached that door yet, I don't have answers.
It's not the same thing as saying find happiness in what you're doing and then one day retire from that. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about
what would happiness be? So another way to ask this question is, particularly for entrepreneurs who are running companies, think about what happens to you after the company and what happens to the company after you.
Yeah, I love that.
And actively think about it while you're still running the company.
No, I notice a lot of senior owners or senior CEOs struggle with this question way too late.
Yeah.
Way too late in their either when it's too late where they need to sell their company and or like in their 60s, 70s, where they're like, wow, I didn't prepare for this question. I didn't prepare to live a life outside of my company because it's such a dramatic change. I see this issue a lot.
Both for themselves and for the company.
That's right.
They didn't prepare the company for somebody else to take over and didn't know what they would do if they weren't running the company.
I will say though, I find that the company survives much more easily than they do. I think the ego believes the opposite, but I see that people suffer quite a bit when they lose their company if they're not prepared. Yeah, super fascinating. I love, again, I could keep talking to you and I appreciate so much of your time here. You've really been so inspirational. You've had this great career. Now you're out speaking to other leaders and CEOs. Just share with the audience a little bit about how they can find you, how they can learn more about your content. Go ahead and talk about your books and where we can find them. I think I've seen almost every single one of your YouTube videos. So your YouTube is fantastic. I really suggest people to listen to his YouTube. It's really great, small snippets of content and leadership, great for note taking. And I also, before you answer that question, is, some of your ideas are legitimately crazy. How many entrepreneurs actually execute on the things that you're talking about?
My staff tells
or are
me
not brave enough to do it?
My staff tells me that of 100 ideas I have, 99 of them are bad.
That's could be true.
And in fact, they even have an expression. When I start telling them a new idea, they go, Balaji, that's one of the 99. And now they start saying that before I've even finished the idea.
Well, if you have a new idea, that means just a bad idea just retired. So we're working on odds.
I had this idea recently that my staff thought was a bad idea. I parked somewhere and went inside a building, and there was this what seemed like a homeless person came and asked for money. I did not give any. I went in, and then I said to myself, he saw me park. I didn't give him some money. Will he do anything to my car? Figured won't happen, be fine. And so I came back, everything was fine. But he was still there. The guy was still there. And this idea came to mind. I said, in fact, when I was gone, I'd only put like 15 minutes in the machine. And when I was gone, I going, I better get back before 15 minutes and I got back and was under 15 minutes. I said to myself, had I been 20 minutes instead of 15, he would have been there. And that would have been 5 minutes when my meter had expired. And he would know. He would say expired. Imagine, and it is all connected these days. They're all connected to credit cards and so on. So he could push a button. Imagine he could push a button on this meter and the parking police will come flying in and issue me a ticket.
Yeah, that's a great thought.
I mean, there are people all over. So imagine you had this system where any expired meter, any passerby can push a button, and within 2 minutes, parking police shows up, they issue a ticket, and they give this person a reward.
But that assumes that you are giving a reward to ask somebody to help you, because you're not going to pay more to the meter. You're. Can I finish your thought here? That you would essentially have, if you had given him money, he would have not pushed the button, or even if a policeman came, said, "Oh yeah, no, this guy just went in. He'll be back in 1 minute."
The homeless person asking for money. I'm just connecting it to the fact that there are people on the street that are able to crowd police parking violations.
Right.
So why don't you crowdsource the reporting of parking violations?
Fascinating.
So you would need fewer parking police people, and they only arrive when there's an incident.
Transparency wins.
My team didn't like this because they say that's like snitching on somebody. Well, it's good for the society. Anyway, so they think 99 of my 100 ideas are bad. And so do I have ideas? I have ideas.
We need to just come up with the Balaji think tank, and people can maybe Balaji, you should ask people to pay for your ideas. Although
that's what they do when they hire me.
Yeah,
that's what they do when they hire me.
Fair. Well, I really appreciate it. But tell us, where can people find you? How can they connect with you if they're interested in connecting with you? Tell us about ThinkShift. Tell us about the books.
So I'm the chairman of a company called ThinkShift. We are an advertising agency, and we essentially approach our assignments from the inside out, meaning we work with CEOs, help the CEOs create a company story, the story incarnated in a company culture, and the culture then drives the brand and all the marketing material that comes out of that brand. That's what we provide. Most of the people in our company, we've got about 70 people, they are on the brand and marketing side, but we have about half a dozen people who are on the side of working with CEOs and creating the story and creating the culture that drives the brand. We also, and I in large part, work with companies to build a company strategy once they've built this heart of the organization, namely the culture. So I do a lot of strategy work with companies. I'm the chairman of ThinkShift. I don't actually do anything in ThinkShift other than going to clients and working with them. I don't have daily roles or activities. I have one day's job in every 3 months. I chair the board meeting. That's it. That's my job. Otherwise, I'm talking to clients. I'm working with my customers. The single distinguishing way I distinguish from other consultants is that I have this concept called tools. Tools are models of thought for understanding the soft stuff in business, a way of thinking about the stuff that otherwise is soft and squishy. What is empowerment? What is stewardship? How do you measure performance? I have lots of models. I have about 200 models in my head. About 150 or 60 of them have been documented. They're documented both in written form and or in video form. I have about 100 videos on YouTube. If you go to YouTube, ThinkShift, Balaji Krishnamurthy, you will get the tools. I call these tools, and there are about 100 tools on YouTube. I have 2 books, one called Food for Thought, which is a collection of about 100 short 2-page, 3-page article on some crazy idea. It is a compilation of 7 years of monthly articles that I wrote and distributed. The title of the book is Food for Thought, written by me. The other book that I have is called Tools, which is 1-page description of each of about 130 tools. Both of them.
Fantastic.
Yeah, the Tools book is called Tools for the Softer Side of Business. The other book is called Food for Thought, both with me as the author, published by ThinkShift, both available on online booksellers. So you can reach me at ThinkShift. I suppose you'll provide email addresses and stuff at some point.
I'm happy to, yeah. And I will suggest, because I have notes all over tools. I have about one for every one of my leaders. It is a really, really great book. I go to it. It's on my desk. It has all kinds of really easy, quick things that you can just turn a page to and thought-provokingly go through an issue or a topic. It's really damn good. It's really well written, Balaji. And it's not a book like normal people think. It really is it's like tricks. It's like tips. It's like one word, and then you get, half a page of some graphic or some framework that you've come up with that helps you break down this one easy topic. They are really good tools. They are just as he's designed. Instead of like a 500-page novel of business strategy, it's a really great framework. And I know that a lot of guys in my group have purchased it and use it every day. So I really encourage the audience to buy Balaji's books or reach out to him if you have a serious issue or interested in hiring him as a consultant. But thanks so much, Balaji. Let me ask you one final question for you. What does it mean to live a rich life?
Let me give you my definition of rich. A rich man is one whose means exceeds his wants. A poor man is one whose wants exceed his means. Nothing to do with the actual dollar amounts. We all know of, great basketball players who made a lot of money and are living in poverty, or some big actor who was very famous but is bankrupt today. And we also know of the shoe shine guy who just seems very happy. Rich and poor have nothing to do with money.
Yep.
How do I define a rich life? Ensure that your wants are always less than your means. I used to tell my kids when they were young and they got a little money, whatever, they say 5 to 10 years old, when they knew enough about money, not enough about how to spend it. I'd say, here's some tests for buying. You must need it. You must want it. It must be a good price, and you must be able to afford it. So we'd go to the store, there'd be this candy or toy, and I would say, do you need it? Yeah, I really need, because you don't have enough toys. Yeah, this one I don't have. And we say, okay, if those are met, we'll wait for 24 hours. If 24 hours later you still need it and want it and can afford it, we'll go get it. They invariably forget 24 hours later. On the few occasions that they don't, I'll drag them out there and they'd buy it. So I tell you that story because we as grown-ups never ask ourselves, do we need it? We ask ourselves, we want it. Do we need it?
We often don't need a lot.
I know. And so the more you convince yourself you don't need it, the richer you become. Not because you saved your money, but because that difference between means and wants grows. Means and wants grows.
Love that. I love that. Balaji, again, thanks for making this time. I honor you for being here today. Really appreciate everything that you're doing for the world and giving back, and especially your thoughtful mind. And I know that you've influenced me to be a better leader and a better thinker. And we'll have to do this again soon, my friend.
Thank you for inviting me, and have a great time in Barcelona.
Thank you, my friend.